On today's show, Jabari Smith Jr. and Amin Thompson absolutely showing out at the Team USA scrimmages this offseason. Plus, we get to part 2 of our Rockets mailbag. Amin's future as the point guard of this Houston Rockets team. How do the Rockets stack up with the rest of the Western Conference? And so much more. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That's the best way that you can help our show out, is to go comment anything below the YouTube video. Just do a drive-by and say, "Go Rockets." It helps us out a ton. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer. A lot to get to on today's episode. Apologize for the delay on the release of this episode, because now I know what it feels like to get pump faked by an energy company. Like I'm sure many of you listening to this podcast, watching, whatever, I'm sure there are frustrations with Centerpoint Energy out there. And thankfully, this podcast is not sponsored by Centerpoint Energy, but, didn't have power for, day and a half, whatever, at the start of the storm, got power back, was able to put out our last episode. I thought everything was back to normal, up and running, whatever. And then I lost power again, like early Tuesday evening, and went something like, 12, 14 more hours with no power. And now we're back up and running. So, hopefully, knock on wood, everything stays normal moving forward. I hope everybody out there is doing okay. I hope you're doing okay with power, safety, all of that. This storm was kind of crazy, but a lot to get to in today's episode. We're going to get to the next half of our mailbag topics, questions, all that stuff in segments 2 and 3 of this episode. I want to spend the first segment here, though, talking about Jabari Smith Jr. and Amin Thompson, who have been two of the standout performers at the Team USA scrimmages in Las Vegas. So the USA select team versus the USA Olympic team, right? So the Olympic team is all the top name players, right? KD, LeBron, Steph, all them. And then the select team tend to be the younger players, right? The hungry guys who come in there and they want a really good practice squad for the actual Olympic team to play against. And we get clips and little, views from the scrimmages, and we get to see how these players are doing. And Amin Thompson and Jabari Smith Jr. have absolutely been two of the standout performers from this, Team USA from the Team USA practices, scrimmages so far. Just from first off, the fact that Jabari and Amin both got the nod to go to join the USA select team is fantastic, right? That shows that they're two of the up and coming, exciting players in the league. That tends to be the way that they select those players. Just they pick some of the more exciting younger guys. So it's a little, notch on their resume that they got the nod in the first place. But just the experience, right? Playing alongside some of their fellow peers, right? Other young players like themselves, but then to go up against literally the best of the best in the NBA, right? All of these future Hall of Famers that they get to practice against daily, that they get to learn from, that they get to share experiences with, all that stuff is going to be monumental for their training, for their growth, for their development, all that. Just kind of, getting to pick the brains of elite players like LeBron, like KD, like Steph, like AD, like Embiid, like Bam, just, the list goes on and on and on for all the players that they're competing against. And then to actually see some of the stuff that they're doing out on the court. Amin Thompson has had some, has a few little highlights out there, right? There's one where he basically just completely casually Euro steps right around Drew Holiday, who is a really good defender. So seeing, Amin have a little bit more polish in his game, a little bit more of something in his bag around the rim, that'll be fun. He had a couple nice dishes to Cooper Flagg as well, who also received the USA select team nod as a 17-year-old, which is kind of crazy. I think he's the first like collegiate NBA player or whatever to receive the honor. So it's kind of crazy that he got added to the team, but he looks every bit at home with these other NBA caliber players, and there's a reason that he's projected to go number 1 overall. But the couple little passes from Amin Thompson to Cooper Flagg, he had one where he dropped it down, kind of dropped it off to him on the low block. He turned around for a jumper. He had another one where he drove in on the right, kind of from the right wing, and had a nice little one-handed kind of skip pass off to the opposite corner, and Cooper Flagg just elevated, drained a corner three-pointer like it was nothing. Some nice little plays from Amin Thompson. And then from Jabari Smith Jr., he had the one that's doing the rounds for Jabari. He caught a pass and absolutely hammered it on top of Joel Embiid. Just put Embiid on a poster. And that's the kind of, there were points last season where it felt like Jabari did a really good job of getting big, right? Playing big, playing strong down low, dunking on guys, going up hard for rebounds, all that stuff, and playing like a legit big man, playing like a 7-footer. And seeing that moment with him just, hammering one home on Embiid, that was really cool. A great moment from him. But what really stands out is apparently their defense. Jamal Mosley, the head coach of the Orlando Magic, who is one of the coaches at USA Training Camp, basically said that they stood out most on the defensive end. And Mosley went on to say, this is by way of Jonathan Fagan from the Houston Chronicle, who is there in attendance and was reporting on this. Coach Mosley was putting Amin Thompson and Jabari Smith Jr. on some of the toughest assignments throughout the scrimmages. There were moments in the final 10 or so minutes of one of their scrimmages where Jabari specifically matched up with LeBron James and then Amin Thompson matched up with Steph Curry, and they both excelled. They both did a great job guarding those two players. So it just speaks volumes about their hunger, their desire, their intensity on the defensive end. Again, we know that both of these guys have a defensive edge to their respective games, but it feels like both of them over the course of last season really leveled up as far as defenders, and I'm incredibly excited to see what this experience does for each of them and what they bring back and just kind of how each of them will level up this next season with the Rockets. It's just some really fun, exciting stuff to think about the futures of both of those guys, two incredibly young, talented pieces for the Rockets. But coming up, I want to get into our other mailbag questions. A big one that I teased at the end of last episode. Have the Rockets given up on Amin's future being the point guard of this team by drafting Reed Sheppard, and a few other topics that we're going to get to? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer that it gets to first pitch. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Look, I don't know about you, but when I'm buying tickets, could be to go to a game, but it's basketball game, baseball game, whatever, could be to a concert, a theater event, whatever it is. I absolutely despise when I'm going through the process, and at the very end, they price gouge you at the end. They're like, oh, here's the service fee or the digital handling fee or the digital whatever fee, all the fees that they try to throw at you last minute. And by then you're just like, oh, fine, I'll just go ahead and pay for it. You don't get that with Game Time. They give you their all-in price up front, so you know exactly how much you're paying from the very beginning, the moment you start selecting your tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, let's go ahead and get into some of the rest of these mailbag questions. So from Card 617, did the Rockets give up on Amin's ability to play point guard by drafting Reed Sheppard? So first off, I love this question because I do think that Reed Sheppard is a little bit of a hedge on Amin Thompson, but I also think Reed Sheppard's he's a hedge on a lot of players. He's a hedge on Fred VanVleet and his potential future with the team. He's a hedge on Jalen Green. He's a hedge on Cam Whitmore. Reed Sheppard is just kind of like a Swiss Army knife of where you want to put him, right? Whether you want to play him off ball as more of a scoring threat, whether you want to play him on ball as more of a primary facilitator, all that. And TBD on what he actually looks like once he starts getting real NBA reps and which of those roles he maybe excels in a little bit further. But I do not think that drafting Reed Sheppard means the Rockets don't envision Amin as a future point guard. They drafted him because they were really high on his ability to create at a high level, his court vision, all of that. But the way that we've seen him deployed so far throughout his rookie season was that of more of a wing type presence, right? Where he played a lot more of his minutes on the wing. He played out of the dunker spot. We really didn't see that many opportunities for Amin to really run the offense. Now, some of that is because he just wasn't ready for it, right? Like the handle's not as tight as it needs to be. Obviously, the glaring weaknesses in his game is his inability to hit outside shots, which makes it a little bit easier to defend him, especially in the half court when you can just sag off of him and give him all that space. So he gets kind of the Ben Simmons, the Russell Westbrook treatment a little bit offensively, which is why the Rockets found it easier to place him in the dunker spot and play him out of that rather than putting the ball in his hands and letting him conduct the offense. But I've talked about this quite a bit on the show at various points. One of the things that I'm most looking forward to this next season is for hopefully internally, right, that the Rockets across the board have better shooting from all their guys, from Jalen, from Sengun, from Jabari, that everybody across the board increases their output as far as shooting is concerned, and they become a better overall shooting team. Because one of the easy recipes for success for Amin Thompson is to put him on the floor, put the ball in his hands, and to put four shooters around him. He wasn't really afforded the opportunity much at all, if ever, last season to really do that. I think that with the addition of Reed Sheppard, with the return of Tari Eason, with the continued emergence of Jabari Smith Jr., with the return of Jeff Green, like hopefully with Alperen Sengun developing a better, more consistent outside shot. Same thing goes for Jalen Green. Like if the team is able to level up across the board, I really do hope, and I actually not even hope, I expect that this next season we will see some stretches where Amin Thompson is afforded the opportunity to run the offense. And we'll see a little bit of both, right? We'll see points where Reed Sheppard is running the offense. We'll see points where Amin Thompson is running the offense. But I actually think if you're talking about just like a match made in heaven, Reed Sheppard is the perfect complementary guard to place next to Amin Thompson if you want that as like the future of the Rockets backcourt potentially, because Reed Sheppard can play on and off ball. He can be a guy that can help set up Amin Thompson in the half court. He can be a running mate for him in transition. And then if you want to put the ball in Amin's hands, then guess what? Reed Sheppard and his incredible, shooting gravity can help open things up even further for Amin Thompson. So no, I don't think that drafting Reed Sheppard means that the Rockets are giving up on Amin's ability to play point guard. But at the same time, maybe Amin's true role is never as a true point guard on a team. Maybe his role is more so as a point forward where you have players alongside him that can kind of complement him with certain skill sets, right? Like envisioning a 1-2-3 lineup of Reed Sheppard, Cam Whitmore, and Amin Thompson, or Reed Sheppard, Jalen Green, Amin Thompson, whatever, where Amin Thompson is effectively your 3 or your small forward on the court. As long as you have shooting around him at the other 4 positions, he can be your point guard or your floor general, and you can put the ball in his hands as long as the other guys have ways of being effective without the basketball. So I do think he's got the great court vision. He's got the passing ability. He's got the great feel for the game. It's going to be about him rounding out the other aspects of his game, right? Adding a little bit of a floater package or a mid-range package to go to, working on that outside shot. And then again, the Rockets putting him in positions where he can be successful with full-blown 5-out spacing with 4 legitimately good shooters around him to really open things up. Because then if Amin Thompson gets going downhill, it's curtains for whoever he's guarding. They're going to have to foul him, or they collapse the defense, send a double team, and then he kicks it out for the open shot. It's a tale as old as time. We've seen so many different teams run that heliocentric style of offense. The Rockets can replicate that same setup with Amin Thompson. Next question I got here for us. Let's see. Who steps up to replace the Boban vibes? Oh man, I don't know who to credit this one to. I didn't sign this off with a name. I'm so sorry. If you asked this question, thank you, because I love it. The Boban vibes are very clearly going to be replaced by Steven Adams. Steven Adams is exactly the same type of really positive locker room presence that you were kind of getting out of Boban, but in an actual serviceable center, right? A guy that you can use as part of your core rotation. So he'll actually be getting, routine minutes on a night-to-night basis as opposed to just very niche minutes in garbage time or very situational minutes here and there against very specific matchups. One thing that I want to note, guys, I have this glorious soundboard over here.
Oh my.
And I desperately need some Steven Adams audio to put on the soundboard. So if you can find me a quote or two from Steven Adams or a soundbite, things that you think would be right at home over here on the soundboard, I need you to find some Steven Adams audio bits and send them my way. Hit me up on Twitter, tag me in a comment on YouTube, whatever the easiest way is for you to send them to me. Send them my way so that I can load up the soundboard, because by season's end, I want to have a mountain of Steven Adams audio bites to choose from on the soundboard, because I feel like he is going to be, not even feel like, I know he is going to be a diamond of a quote. So I'm sure I'll find some good ones throughout the course of this next season. But before then, I'm sure he's got some quotes from his Memphis days, from his OKC days, so we can sift through those. I just haven't had a chance to yet. So Boban's good vibes are clearly going to be replaced by Steven Adams. Wanted to tackle that one because that's a bit of a fun one. Let's get into this next one. The potential of the Houston Rockets offense with an actual knockdown shooter and how it will affect the spacing from big Houston guy. Well, we kind of talked about this a little bit with the Amin Thompson question, but I do think that we're going to see this team take a significant, level up considerably this next season, right? They were 23rd in 3-point percentage this past season. They were not a good 3-point shooting team. It really took until post All-Star break for them to kind of change their offensive dynamic to where they started prioritizing more outside shots, playing with more tempo, and really working to get, those 3-point looks that we've known this Rockets team for years to prioritize. So I think some of that is a personnel issue. The Rockets didn't have many quick shooters. They didn't have many volume 3-point shooters this past season. A lot of it was, overly reliant on Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green to be hoisting anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10 3-pointers a game, because we just didn't have players who could shoot that much, shoot that good, shoot well from distance on volume, I should say, last season. So adding Reed Sheppard certainly helps. But again, Reed Sheppard's not going to be getting 20, 25, 30 minutes a night right out of the gate, but adding another legitimate threat from three, having that, having a guy who hopefully there's not much of a fall off from Fred VanVleet to Reed Sheppard as far as just stylistically some of the things that they're able to do on the floor. And then you want to see, again, continued improvement from guys like Jalen Green, who needs to become a better outside shooter. Alperen Sengun needs to become a better outside shooter. Jabari Smith Jr., if he can level up again as an outside shooter and get closer to, 38, 39, 40% from three this next season, that would be huge for him. Tari Eason is a respectable outside shooter. Jeff Green, hopefully not him, having him not play the full-time backup 5-man minutes means he'll have fresher legs and be able to be, a more consistent outside threat instead of his 3-point percentage, being in the tank after the first month of the season, where he had a really strong first month and then was just really, really bad after that. Not, bad in general, but just the shooting percentage numbers were kind of all over the place for Jeff Green. So, and then just more consistent minutes for Cam Whitmore in the rotation, right? That'll be a big one. And then Dillon Brooks, hopefully he can keep the shooting up. So I do think across the board, we're going to see a better Rockets team with an offense that's a bit, more properly spaced out, teams that have to really have to hone in on the Rockets shooters. And again, that will hopefully be opening things up quite a bit more for guys like Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green. We already know that those two guys are the two guys on the roster that can routinely command a double team. Jalen, the way that he was playing to end the season, and Alperen Sengun, the way that he played pretty much all year up until his injury. So if you can get both of those two guys back in the mix and playing the way that they were at separate times last year and playing at the same way together, then it's going to be really tough for teams to defend the Rockets this next season. Coming up, want to get into the last few of our mailbag questions here. The big one, how do the Rockets stack up in the Western Conference compared to all the other teams in this bloodbath of a Western Conference? Plus a couple more questions. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, we're going to get to another couple smaller ones before we get to the Western Conference standings kind of question, because a lot of people ask that question in some degree, shape, or form, was, how do the Rockets stack up to the rest of the Western Conference? And we're probably going to, unpack that in a bigger, more fully fleshed out episode in the future, maybe with some crossovers from some other hosts. But we're gonna tackle that a little bit further down the line. Let's get into this next question. What do you expect from Tari coming off of a lost season from injury? From Tom Thumper. Appreciate the question, Tom. From Tari, I mean, Tari's such a peculiar piece of the Rockets' young core, because I feel like at times myself and others have kind of boxed him into this role where he's just, Tari, you're a 3-and-D wing. That's what you're going to be. And I think there's maybe a little bit more under the surface to his game. Maybe he's capable of a little bit more. Tari's also the type of player that he's good at what he does. He stays in his lane. He doesn't overstep his, he doesn't overexert himself or try to do too much when he's on the floor, right? He rebounds at a high level. He defends at a high level. He knocks down open shots. He makes the right simple pass to his teammates. He'll drive it in and finish at the rim. Very simple things. Is Tari ever going to be a superstar? Probably not. But at the same time, I am curious to see, is there more to Tari Eason's game, right? What more do the Rockets coaching staff, what more does Ime Udoka think that he can get out of Tari Eason as a player? Is he just a 3-and-D wing, or does he have another gear that he can get into? Does he have a level up that we're going to see that obviously we didn't get a chance to see here this past season? Played 21 games, so for all intents and purposes, he's still kind of in a sophomore essentially. So at the end of the day, I just want to, first and foremost, I want to see Tari have a healthy season. Obviously, it was kind of a freak injury with the tumor on his leg, all that stuff. I just want to see him have a healthy season. We know how impactful he is when he is healthy. So that's the main thing that I want out of Tari Eason, is just a healthy season. And at the end of the day, I think from an impact perspective and a sheer talent perspective, I would love to see Tari Eason take over the starting small forward spot by season's end. I think it would probably require, and I mentioned this in our last episode, it would probably require a Dillon Brooks trade to facilitate, because I doubt that there's a world where Dillon Brooks gets moved to the bench in favor of starting Tari Eason, or potentially another name like Amen Thompson or something, and is happy about that change. But if that's the case, if the Rockets feel comfortable enough to move Dillon Brooks because they're ready to give Tari Eason that starting small forward spot, more power to him. I'd love to see it. I think he's ready for it right now. There's just a bit of a logjam at the wing spot for the Rockets. Next question we got: which of the vets on the roster will be here long term with the Rockets, paying all of the young players? From Yisrael. I think that of all the vets that the Rockets have on the roster, I've talked about it a couple times now, I think Dillon Brooks is very unlikely to play out the entirety of his contract as a Houston Rocket. He's got a sizable contract. It's probably going to be used as salary filler in a trade down the line, or again, the Rockets could potentially look to just offload Dillon Brooks and receive back, a late first rounder or something to that effect, if they feel good enough about their wing rotation with Tari, Jabari, and potentially AJ Griffin getting into the mix here in Houston. So that's a distinct possibility. I think of all the vets on the roster, Fred VanVleet's future is the most interesting to me, because obviously he's getting paid out the wazoo right now. The Rockets have a chance, though, this upcoming offseason where they could decline his third-year team option for 40 some odd million, whatever it is, and they could renegotiate a new deal with Fred VanVleet where he stays on for less money yearly, but for a longer term, right? So the Rockets decline that final year of his option. Maybe they re-sign him to something like 3 years, $75 million, 4 years, $100 million, whatever. And he gets less average annual value, but he gets to stick with the team. Maybe he slowly transitions from a starting role into a bench role. I could very easily see Fred VanVleet play, and potentially retire as a Houston Rocket. I know that he loves it here in Houston. He's really attached to this team. He loves Ime Udoka, and he's really embraced this role with this Rockets young group of being that veteran leader. And I think that as he ages and as the rest of the young core kind of come into their own and grow and blossom into the players that we hope that they can become, Fred would potentially, be open to the idea of transitioning into that reserve role where he can still be a part of this Rockets team as they're on the upswing, as they're potentially vying for titles down the line. And what better way than to witness all the young guys that you helped grow and develop and coach up and helping still guide them to a championship, albeit in a potentially slightly lesser role down the line. So I think of all the vets, I think Fred is the most likely to be here long term if he's willing to, at the end of this current contract, renegotiate for more money, more long-term money, but less money on a year-to-year basis. And that's also kind of dependent on if there's another team out there that's willing to offer Fred the bag to come be their starting point guard, which TBD, because the NBA is always constantly shaken up. So we'll see what happens next summer 2025, and what the Rockets ultimately decide to do with his contract. But final question here. How do the Rockets stack up as it compares to the rest of the Western Conference? I don't even have a specific question here because a lot of people ask this question about how things look when you look out west. And we talked about this a little bit recently, but I think it's worth going over again and repeating. But you look up and down the Western Conference, and of the 5 teams that did not make the playoffs this past season, right? The Rockets right there at 41-41. Then you got the Jazz, the Grizzlies, the Spurs, and the Blazers. Of all those 5 teams, the Blazers are the only one that are not going to have a chance in hell to sniff the playoffs. So that's one team out. But those 4 other teams, the Rockets want to make the postseason. The Grizzlies are getting Ja Morant back in a reloaded roster. They want to make the postseason. The Utah Jazz have been shopping Lauri Markkanen, TBD on whether they actually move on from him. I won't say that, pardon me, I won't say that the Jazz will not, definitively will not make the postseason, but this past year, they did win 31 games, right? So, there's a chance if they decide to, not move on from Lauri Markkanen and maybe make a trade or two midseason, maybe the Jazz make a late push for the play-in tournament. We'll see what they're ultimately, you know what, for now, I'm going to table the Jazz as just above the Portland Trailblazers. So we're going to go Blazers 15th in the West, Jazz at 14th in the West. The Spurs have clearly made some moves where they're ready to start winning now. Now, whether or not they make the jump from 22-60 all the way to a play-in team, that's a pretty massive jump to try and make in one season, but they do have Wemby. They added Chris Paul. They added Harrison Barnes. They've added some veteran pieces. They've added more young talent. They have Stephon Castle now. They've got the rest of their young talent that they already had. There's a very realistic pathway for the Spurs to make some noise in the Western Conference this next season and maybe make a push towards the play-in tournament. So I'll have the Spurs kind of right above the Blazers and the Jazz as kind of the 13th team in the West. The Grizzlies and the Rockets are going to be the party crashers, right? Those are the teams. The Grizzlies are one season removed from being the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. They want to get back to that level of contention with Ja Morant hopefully healthy and in tow. The Rockets obviously want to make the jump and get back to the playoffs. They just missed out this past season, fell a little bit short of the Golden State Warriors. But then you start looking up and down the Western Conference. And we'll make this hopefully kind of quick, but the OKC Thunder and the Dallas Mavericks, they both got better, right? The Thunder added Caruso and Hartenstein. The Mavericks added Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, and I'm blanking. I feel like they added somebody else, didn't they? And I'm blanking on who it is. The Mavericks got better, though. The Mavericks, and Quentin Grimes. There we go. Traded Tim Hardaway Jr. for Quentin Grimes. So the Mavericks across the board, they got better. They found pieces that fit with what they do. And I think those 2 teams clearly got better. That was the 1 seed OKC Thunder, the 5th seed Dallas Mavericks. They clearly got better. The Timberwolves kind of maintained status quo. They did add Rob Dillingham. They lost Kyle Anderson. So TBD on the Timberwolves. The Nuggets got worse, losing KCP though. They haven't really, answered any of their depth issues, and their starting lineup clearly got weaker. The Clippers losing Paul George, they literally lost a star caliber player, and Kawhi Leonard's knee is potentially toast, right? Like he was with Team USA for all of 5 days of practice time, and then had to pull out and say, I can't do this anymore. The Clippers were concerned about his knee. His knee is cooked. They kept James Harden. Yeah, they added Kevin Porter Jr. They added Derrick Jones Jr. from the Mavs, poached him. The Clippers, I think, are poised for a tailspin and potentially going to sink quite a bit down the Western Conference standings. The Suns, complete powder keg. That situation could be ready to blow at any moment. One significant injury, one blow up, one trade demand, whatever. The Suns, they finished as the 6th seed, but they limped their way to the 6th seed in the West this past season. The Lakers didn't get better. They didn't add anything of consequence. The Kings, I think, did get better. Adding DeMar DeRozan will be big for them. Even though the fit is kind of funky next to De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, I do fully believe the Kings got better, and they also dealt with a lot of injuries this past season, so them just being healthy and adding DeMar DeRozan should see them back to closer to where they were when they finished as the 3rd seed a couple seasons ago. I fully expect the Kings to finish top 6 in the Western Conference, and the Warriors got worse. The Warriors lost Klay Thompson, and he was a big part of what they did. And yeah, they added Buddy Hield and Kyle Anderson and DeAnthony Melton. Unless the Warriors pull off a massive trade for Lauri Markkanen, I'm kind of ready to write the Warriors off. We know that Steph Curry cannot carry that team all by himself, and they just do not have the offensive push that they're going to need to be able to survive in the Western Conference. I just don't see it. So I think there's a bunch of teams that got worse in the Western Conference. Oh, and then the Pelicans. They still don't have a center. TBD on what the Pelicans ultimately do. But DeJounte Murray, they added him, and, I think DeJounte Murray still has this reputation as being a quote-unquote good defender when he was a train wreck defensively for the Atlanta Hawks. Maybe things change if he has teammates like Herb Jones and Trey Murphy who are bought in defensively and are bought into a defensive identity under Willie Green, possibly. But the jury's still out there, and they don't have a big man. They literally don't have a center. They're still kind of stuck in Brandon Ingram limbo, trying to figure out what happens there. So I really think that there's a chance for the Rockets to leapfrog a few of those teams. I could see the Warriors completely missing the playoffs. I could see the Pelicans potentially imploding and having a disappointing season. Also, I hate to be the bearer of bad news for any potential Pelicans fans who are listening to this, but Zion Williamson's injury history is not great, and one significant gap of time for Zion, one stretch of the season missed for him, and the Pelicans could see themselves plummet in the standings. Lakers, very similar situation there. One major injury to LeBron or AD, and then suddenly they plummet. And even if those guys are healthy, the Lakers just didn't get better. They just didn't make any important acquisitions. They didn't pick up anybody of relevance. Dalton Connect will help them a little bit, but they struck out on every major name that they wanted to get their hands on this past offseason. And then the Clippers got worse. And the Nuggets, yes, they've still got the 3-time MVP in Jokic, and yes, they're still 1 year removed from their championship run, but they are a weaker overall team. We know that they struggled with some injuries last season, and they're one of the teams that I fully expect to kind of coast throughout the regular season and not put too much effort into chasing a top seed, especially given how it impacted them this past season, right? They went chasing for that 1 seed, and they kind of ran out of gas as the playoffs showed up. So I don't expect them to go pedal to the metal throughout the regular season. There's probably still a lock for a top 6 seed or a top 4 seed in the West without much fuss because Jokic is just insane. But I do expect them to regress a little bit across the board. So I think from all the teams that have the most significant chance to drop out, the Warriors, the Lakers, and the Clippers potentially all dropping considerably in the standings. And then you paint the Rockets as a team that could potentially, just from the acquisitions that they made, right? Adding Steven Adams, getting Tari Eason healthy, not, having Alperen Sengun back, not missing a quarter of the season. Hopefully Jalen Green starts out the year on a much stronger note than what he did last season. Adding Reed Shepherd, another year of growth and development. I think you're at least talking about the Rockets adding anywhere from 5 to 10 wins this next season. Let's say that puts them at anywhere from 46 to 50 wins. That would be good enough for, at a minimum, the back end of the play-in tournament based on last year's standings. But if they cracked 50 wins, then they'd be a top 6 seed. So I think that's kind of this team's ceiling is like the 5th or 6th seed in the West this next season. If things break kind of favorably for them, I think at worst, we're looking at the Rockets being the 9th or possibly 10th seed, depending on what other teams take a step forward this next year. So with that, that's going to wrap up our mailbag. If I didn't get to one of your questions, I do apologize. Thank you for everybody that submitted them. There were a few questions in there that I want to kind of flesh out and do as full-blown shows a little bit further down the line. Some of the salary cap related questions and things like that. We're going to revisit those in future episodes. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share your thoughts on everything we talked about in today's episode. How are you feeling about Jabari Smith Jr. and Amin Thompson and some of the clips that you've seen out of the Team USA scrimmages? Let me know in the YouTube comments. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, 5-star review helps out a ton. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.